idea of the sharenting that you just shared, the impact of the digital footprint, boy, that's a really interesting dialogue that I would love to continue to have, even with other guests, and maybe explore that specifically on one of these shows, because that's really interesting, man. I will tell you that I thought about this multiple times, being the leader of Front Row Dads and wanting to be vulnerable, wanting to be
Yeah,
transparent, wanting to be honest.
absolutely.
I want to talk about my relationship with my wife. I want to talk about our sex life. I want to talk about, and then I'm realizing that, man, this is all stuff my kids are going to be, they're like, let me go back and learn about dad. You're like, learned a little too much about dad in episode 42.
Absolutely.
You know, but so I've struggled with that. Like, even when I wrote my book, The Front Row Factor, I was like, how honest do I want to be? And there's a point when you go, I want to be totally honest, but you go, is that what I want to be? Is totally, like, is every thought that entered my head the one that I need to write on paper? Or,
Right.
you know, I've thought about this a lot, even my journals. Like, you know, one of our guys was saying, like, you know, we sometimes with our journals have this vision of, like, one day when we die and we're famous and they have our journals in a museum. They're like, here's the journal. Here's what John wrote on
Yes.
October 28th, 2019. And then you're like, no, I hope my journals get burned when I die, because I've written some crazy stuff in them. Who knows? But I want to be open. I want to be transparent. I want to be real, especially in my line of work, where I want my guys to know, like, hey, this is a challenge. But you're bringing up a really good point about, you know, wanting to share with or wanting to maybe involve our kids in that. I sometimes wonder, like, I'd be like, Ocean, are you okay with me posting this picture of your butt? He's like, yeah, go ahead. Right.
Of course.
I know. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
joking.
No, I know. And the funny part is, of course, at 5, you know, they don't have the quite
Exactly.
worldly understanding of even knowing. And, you know, I love that you brought that up. I mean, that took a certain level of vulnerability even to talk about your desire to be vulnerable. And that's where I feel a kinship with you, because I think there's a lot of things we're very similar. You know, for me, you know, I have to ask myself, all right, does someone need to co-sign on this vulnerability? You know, your example of saying, you know, you would want to talk about your sex life with your wife. Well, is she okay with the level of vulnerability that you would share? And clearly that would be a discussion for you guys to have. And that's what I try to do with my kids, is say, you know, hey, I'm going to make a post, and, you know, a very small percentage of my posts do I try to make like, hey, everyone, here's my kids, like, look at them. 'Cause I know no one cares about my kids the way I care about them. When I do post stuff about my kids, I always want there to be some type of lesson involved. And I do think, you know, you and I have a responsibility to show that we are present, connected fathers, because we want to lead by example to others.
Correct.
And I want someone to see a post and goes, man, Alan was at his kid's basketball game all weekend. I should be doing that too. So I do want that to a level. But this co-signing thing is really important. And for me, from a vulnerability standpoint, you know, I think, okay, what's the positive that could come out of this? If I share a really deep thought right now, let me list the positives that could come out, but let's also look on the other side. Like, who could this hurt? Who could this impact? You know, is it something well beyond just me? Because we have to be incredibly responsible with everything that we post. And, you know, if this was taken out of context, you know, especially if you start talking about, you know, things like depression, or eating disorders, or mental illness, you know, and I've had bouts of depression in the past. And like I said, I've been through therapy, I've been on different medications, and I want to be able to share certain things, but I also have to make sure that I'm doing so in a very responsible way. And that landscape is never easy. So, you know, I know a good friend of mine said to use this filter before you make any post on social media. Number 1, does it need to be said? Number 2, does it need to be said by me? Number 3, does it need to be said by me right now? And as long as you can say yes to those 3 things, then by all means post away. But I think when we get into some of these stickier situations, we have to ask ourselves, all right, do I really need to say this? Like, how's this going to help the world? Is this something that's best coming from me? Or maybe there's a video or an article I could link to. And then, do I need to say this now? Is it appropriate? And these are things that I'm constantly juggling. And one of the things I'm fortunate is I kind of have an inner circle of people. They happen to be people I work with, but my brother's one of them. And they audit my social stuff. And every once in a while I'll put something up and, you know, my agent will send me a text and she'll kind of roll her eyes with an emoji and say like, why did you just post that? That's not helping me. Take it down. And I'm like, but here's what, and she's like, just take it down. And
That's
I do.
awesome.
And yeah. So I also know that I'm incredibly fallible, like everybody listening to this. So I also have this team of people that if I don't see my blind spot, they care enough about me to say, Alan, here's how that post is being perceived. I know you meant it to be this because I know you. Here's how other people might perceive it, and it's not a good look. Take it down.